this is Victoria Mosier, and I'm going to show you today how to make a face mask. CDC is recommending face masks to us to help us keep distance from the virus when 6 feet is not possible. So I'm going to show you how to make one. First off, you need your pattern. So I have one for a fitted mask and one for a pleated mask. For the pleated mask, you also need possibly a jig to help you get the measurements correctly. So I've also got a jig as well. First thing you have to do is you have to have a pair of paper scissors. Do not use your fabric scissors on paper because they can become dull. So you really need to make sure you have a pair of paper scissors and a pair of regular fabric scissors. You're also going to need either straight pins, or I like to use these clips. These are really nice to be able to hold your fabric while you're sewing. Also, you will need your choice of either your black elastic or your white elastic, and it's usually like 1/4 inch or less elastic. You also need a bias tape in the color of your choice. Bias tape and elastic is hard to find, so you have to search the internet to find them. Finding them in the store is really difficult. So choose your color, and usually black and white is pretty much there. You also have the option of these nose wires. You don't need these. You can put nose wires in, or also these little ear clips to help adjust in the ears. So as you can see on this pleated mask, it has elastic with the ear adjustment, and then it's got a nose bender or nose fitter in it. So you can do that. Also, it's nice to possibly even have what's called a rotary cutter and a cutting mat. If you're adept enough to cut out your pattern with a rotary cutter and a cutting mat, and you have that, it is very useful as well. First thing you need to do is to cut out your pattern with your paper scissors. So choose the pattern that you want, whether it's a fitted or a pleated, and cut it out with your paper scissors. So I have cut out the fitted one, and I have cut out the pleated one as well. And then the pleated one also came with a template for the bias tape. So you have the template for the bias tape. So we'll set that one to the side because we don't need it right now. And then we have the sewing jig or the pleating jig. Then I've cut it out as well. The pleating jig is going to go over with the ironing board because that's where you'll use that. So use your paper scissors to cut out your pattern. Okay, once you have your pattern cut out, the next thing to do is to choose the fabric that you want. You know, any cotton fabric is fine for your face mask. Cotton woven fabric is what they recommend. Okay, and also they recommend to have at least 2 layers, if not 3 layers. Okay, so if you have a 2-layer fabric and then you put a filter in, you can use a coffee filter or anything like that to put into your mask. So if you have a pocket, put in it and leave it open for a pocket. And we'll do that today. We'll leave it open to put a filter in as well. And then you need a backing fabric. And this, I like to use a muslin fabric for the backing fabric, but you don't necessarily have to use that. You can actually use your just another color for the back so you know which one is the inside of your mask and which is the outside of your mask. Okay, the first thing you need to do is to line up on your pattern onto your fabric. So I'm going to use some straight pins to pin the fabric and the pattern together. So you just, a couple pins on each side is all you really need from the pleated one. Pin it down. And then on your fitted one, the same thing. Just pin your pattern on to your fabric. It holds it while you're cutting and makes it really a lot easier to cut. Alright, to cut out your pattern, you can use a rotary cutter or you can use a pair of fabric scissors. If you're using a pair of fabric scissors are called shears, and they have a flat edge on one side so they lay down against the table when you're cutting. Okay, so you take your fabric scissors and just cut around the edge of your pattern. If you have a rotary cutter, this is a lot faster. You just press it down onto your cutting mat, follow around the pattern. Just kind of like you're cutting pizza. Cut around it. And that's it. Then you want to do the same thing with your lining fabric. Lay it out, cut it out. For the fitted mask, we need to determine the right side and the wrong side of the fabric. So we have the right side, which is colored side, and then we have the wrong side, and that's the dull side. You have to pin the right sides of the fabric together along the curve. So we're going to pin it together along the curve. And then you also want to do the same thing with the lining fabric. So we're going to pin it together, the right sides along the curve. And then you'll take this to the machine and you want to stitch 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the curve. Okay, we're sewing 1/4 of a seam allowance. At the beginning and the end of your seam, you need to do a back stitch that locks it into place. And so we're going to stitch just 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the curve, taking the pins out as you come to them so that they don't dull your sewing machine needle. Back stitch at the end, and then that's the lining, and you'll do the same thing with the top fabric or your colored fabric. Okay, on your lining fabric, we want to take the short ends and we're going to turn it under twice. So 1/4 of an inch twice. So it ends up being a 1/2 inch, but you're going to turn it under 1/4 of an inch twice and pin. Measure and pin. Do that to both ends. This is creating your pocket or your filter pocket so you have a place to put your filter into. These, sorry. Once you've pinned, you're going to stitch. So stitch along the fold. Once you've finished finishing the edges of your lining fabric, you're going to fit it to your top fabric. It will be longer because this you'll finish up later. You want to match your center seam. And pin along the top curve. Match your seam at the bottom and pin the bottom. And then we're going to take it back to the machine and we're going to sew this. Again, using that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Back stitching, stitch your curve. Take the pins out as you come. Do that same thing on the bottom. At this point, you can turn your mask right side out. And then you want to press it. So we'll have to take it to the iron and press. At this point, you want to press your mask so that you have a nice crisp seam. Roll your seams a little bit so the seams roll all the way out, and then just press. At this point, we'll take it back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch up at the top. Okay, we're top stitch the curved edge. As you can see, it's top stitching. And we have a top stitch around the curve, and then you'll do the same thing on the bottom. this point we need to finish these ends. As you can see, we have a pocket area, so we need to finish the ends now where our elastic is going to go for our ears. So the first thing we're going to do is take it back to the ironing board, and we're going to turn this under about 1/4 of an inch. And we're going to press it. Do that on both ends. At this point, then you want your bias tape. So it's a bias tape. It has a double fold, and so it's folded like that. And you're going to use your template that you have, cut your bias tape to length, and you'll need 2 of these, one for each end. Then you're going to have to finish the ends of the bias tape. You can see the bias tape's a little bit longer than your mask. So we're going to take and we're going to do the same thing that we did here to the ends of the bias tape to make them the correct length and finish those. So press, measure it to make sure it's the same length as your mask. Fold this one under as well. Press it. Sew it on the take it to machine, sew those ends, and repeat with the other side. Once you've done that, then you're going to attach your folded bias tape to your mask. Use a clip to hold it. And I like to use a zigzag stitch to stitch this part. If your machine doesn't have a zigzag stitch, you can just use a straight stitch. Gotta remember which one I use. Once you have zigzagged your edge, then you're ready to go and insert your elastic. For each mask, you need 12 inches of elastic. Once you've cut 12 inches of elastic, you can either use a elastic puller like this or a safety pin to pull your elastic through your mask. To use the puller, you put it through your mask, maybe. Hook it to the end of your elastic and pull it through. If you're using a safety pin, you hook the safety pin to your elastic and thread that through. At this point, you need to match the ends of your elastic together. Bring it to the machine and you're going to stitch the two ends of the elastic. I sew about 2 or 3 different, maybe 4 times across the elastic. Do that to both ends of your elastic. And then you're going to take and you're going to pull your sewn in back inside of your mask so that you end up with a finished end. So pull the ends in. Sometimes you have to use something to help push it in. Pull it to the inside. And then you're going to stitch. So we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to do a little bit of a top stitch to help hold the elastic in place. And you'll repeat that with the other end. Then trim your loose threads. And you have a fitted mask. For the filter in your fitted mask, just take a coffee filter, cut it in half, and then it can be inserted into the mask through the pocket, your filter pocket. So you just stuff it in there and lay it out flat. Sometimes you have to reach through the other side, pull it through. Put your coffee filter into it, into your mask, and lay it out flat, press it flat, and then now you have a mask that has a filter inside. Don't necessarily have to have one, but it does add an extra layer of protection for you. There's your fitted mask.